Elliot, what do you got?
I'm doing great. Well, you guys sent me some information over the week about what Tim Tebow, a couple of other stuff, other things related to previous week's topics.
Mm-hmm.
If anything you guys wanted to talk about the articles that we read, I didn't have a chance to read through them thoroughly myself.
No.
So if you guys want to share the context,
You didn't do your work.
I know with the Tim Tebow thing, number one, that was just the timing of that was crazy because we literally just, and I said at the beginning, like I don't really want to rehash this, but I care about it, a lot, and we haven't really touched base on it. But for Tim Tebow to be signed by the Jacksonville Jaguars as a tight end under Urban Meyer, I mean, it really led me to, of course, the whole conversation of nepotism and how that works. Well, of course, because it includes friends and sort of stuff as well. Family, friends, preferential treatment. Yes, of course. And because to me, I don't have an issue with it just as it is. But when you look at the other angles, i.e., of course, the first person you would go to was Colin Kaepernick, and what most people would say is, well, maybe he doesn't have those relationships. And then people who don't like Colin Kaepernick would say he doesn't have those relationships because of who he is. But then you would assume that somewhere within the NFL there would have to be someone black who has some sort of power who may feel along the lines that he feel. Who would say, I'll take a chance on him. And then you think about, well, Pete Carroll was going to take a chance on him. Right. And then also, I believe it was Jim Harbaugh in Baltimore.
Right.
Was going to take a chance on him as well. The situation in Baltimore, I can't remember exactly why that didn't work out, but with Pete Carroll said that, he's a starter. I'm not going to put him as a backup to Russell Wilson. That's going to cause a friction. That would cause an issue.
Right.
That he's still a starter. But it made me think about, well, how many black coaches are there in the NFL? And they think about the Rooney Rule that says you have to at least interview one black coach. And why do we even have to do that in a league that's 70 to 80% black for the past 30 years at least,
Yep.
And it made me think about how black people in general even deal with nepotism. Because quite frankly, we don't tend to do that well at all. Everyone that I know who's black who went to college say that the thing they took from college more than anything is the social aspect.
Right.
Building these connections, building these bridges to different people who are trying to better themselves, who have educated themselves. So that way, when you do need that help, or you do need a job or a situation like that, you have these bridges. And what's sad is that you have to go to college in order to build those connections. We don't already have that really just within our own families or our community to that extent. Yes, it happens to some degree, but normally where we have it is that if your uncle doesn't give you this job, you probably don't have a chance in anything, period. As in where normally in the white community, of course, where you have, like I said already, 69-point-something% of the country is white. Number one, there's more opportunity for nepotism to take place. And also you have more opportunity even as an individual to where you may not get it from this uncle, but you could get it from this uncle. And I think about, of course, personal situations that I know of where is a relative of my wife's.
Mm-hmm.
His brother owns he owns a major dealership. He's a car dealership owner. And then his sister also owns a grocery store. Well, she owns a couple of grocery stores in a major chain.
Oh my God.
And he just had a market. And to me, he was rich when I met him before I knew any of these things. And then to find out that within his family, he's the poor one. When he's pulling down 6 figures a year.
Wow.
Easy.
Right.
But he still had those connections to the grocery store. So whatever he wanted, if there's certain things that he wanted for his market, he could get the great grocery store price for his market.
Okay.
Which worked out wonderful for him. And then he always had a brand new truck, I'll say, from that company. From his brother. He always could get that brand new truck. And not that it was free or just given to him, but these connections and opportunities were there. And if it needed to be worked on, it always went to the dealership. And when I purchased a vehicle of the same brand, I could call him, he would call his brother, I'll take it to that dealership. And they would fix it.
You got...
When I had that, I was able to receive that at that time, that benefit. When we would consider family at that time. So.
Okay, there's a lot there again.
Yeah.
So we went from Tim Tebow in the NFL with Urban Meyer, who coached him at Florida, right, to nepotism, and then nepotism as it relates to, you're saying there's not as much opportunity in the black community to give a hand up kind of thing?
Well, yeah. Like I said, when you started being 13%, and then you also we're not as many of us as economically well off.
Yeah,
then
I don't
it's
have
difficult
I wouldn't know
to
how
work
to
through that
argue
as well.
that percentage-wise, but but what you're describing to me is nepotism that you received.
Yes.
Right? Preferential treatment for your truck and whatever else.
From someone outside of my race.
Oh, okay, he's white.
Yes.
So are you saying that's a problem? Like that's a bad thing?
Honestly, I think to me it became a very sad thing as I went through it in my mind, because it's almost as if what people talk about is, to be frank, a crabs in a bucket mentality within my community. And it's a very sad thing that we feel like we can't get ahead unless we're pulling someone else down. Like it's not enough to go around, essentially, for our community. That it's only so many odd dollars. And on a major scale, which you two probably won't know anything about this, but some of the viewers probably will, is that right now in the community there's a guy named, in the YouTube community, he's a black guy named Kevin Samuels, who does image consulting, quote unquote. And he talks to women about the things that they should make better about themselves. Well, anyway, there's also men who talk about these women as queens, goddesses. Black women are perfect. And those black women tend to donate money to the guy who's saying they're perfect. Well, they also do spend money to get image consulting so they can help find them a husband from Kevin Samuels. Well, Kevin Samuels recently, within the past year, went from like 30,000 subscribers to 1.5 million or so, and blew right past all these other guys who've been bigging women up. So they're attacking him because they share the same pool of money, essentially. My target, all of them have the same target audience of black women. Some of those guys that were bigging them up aren't making the money that Kevin Samuel is, why he's letting them know these are the mistakes that y'all are making. And the reason I brought that up is because it relates back to that crab in a bucket mentality. Like, I see you're starting to make money where I was making money, and you making money may affect my money. And so I'm going to pull you down. And so...
But that's not a racial thing.
I can't speak to how much that takes place outside of the black community. Okay. I only know about it within the black community. And I'm sure people do it everywhere. But... I think because opportunities within our community, or at least we believe that opportunities are so scarce that this essentially is the only way. The same reason people say that a guy sells drugs. Well, I could sell drugs, or I could play ball, or I could be a doctor. I'm not smart enough to be a doctor. I don't have a jump shot. I gotta do what I gotta do to make good money. And it's just like, no, there's other things you can do besides sell drugs too. But if he doesn't know that, because that's all he's ever seen is these three options, then he's going to sell drugs.
Okay.
So,
further. You went this way.
Yeah, I think we got to narrow down
what
the issue we want to talk about.
And as I said, I guess we can get back to the beginning of that, which would be
Tebow and
Tim Tebow's situation versus Colin Kaepernick's situation. The rest of that is, like I said, these are
things that
will
make sense too.
Wills will, they will be going.
That's cool. I like it. What I took away from the Tim Tebow thing, one, I do think that Tebow is in shape enough to play ball. Now he's been playing Major League Baseball.
Minor league.
AAA. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, minor league. He's been playing.
Yeah.
He's been playing baseball, and he's in excellent condition. Doing a little research on it, I looked a little further, and I mean, boy, looks fit. Now he's 34 years old. That's kind of old to come back to the NFL, but in a tight end role, and honestly, what I read looking further was that Urban Meyer knows Tim Tebow and maybe his character, his nature, and a lot about him. And I don't think even, what we talked about last week, nobody challenged. You said people were questioning his faith.
I'm not challenging it, though.
But he's a good guy. Yeah. And he's gone on to demonstrate that post to his previous NFL stuff. I mean, he does a lot of philanthropic work. I mean, he's out there. And one of the writers implied, something like, for Trevor Lawrence, who, the Jaguars got, this might be a little bit of a mentoring thing too. If he can, because Trevor Lawrence, he's a person of faith, Southern kid, from Georgia right here. And how the University of Georgia let Trevor Lawrence get to Clemson, I don't know how that happened. Somebody needs to talk to him. But maybe it's an opportunity for Tebow to kind of mentor him too. A young quarterback coming in, maybe he can speak some truth. And Tebow will probably catch a few passes. I mean, he also, in a bind, is not a bad backup to run a trick play or something. So that was one spin. And then I think, in one of the video that you sent, I kind of like the one guy's, this is an opportunity for Tebow to kind of shine. And it does make sense that Urban Meyer does have a previous relationship with him. And, being a new coach in a new situation, trying to build a team kind of thing, it's good to have a comfort blanket. I think that's the way the one guy put it, have a
security
somebody
blanket.
there, security blanket, that that you can trust that if I put this on him, he's going to do it. I don't know. I mean, so I think the question a lot of people were asking is why bring him back and why bring him back now? Well, that answers a lot of those questions. What we were talking about was the dichotomy, the difference between how Tebow was received for taking a knee in the end zone and how Kaepernick was received or perceived for taking a knee during the anthem. Mm-hmm. And, you were defending Kaepernick's position. I was arguing that he probably was not the quarterback he once was, and when you create that much trouble, you're probably not going to get the job. And you argued the same thing about Tebow, that people were questioning him and so forth, and at Denver they had a problem with him, and that was kind of the last really hurrah he had.
But to also put in
what is the difference between the two? I thought about this week, because we talked about it a lot last week, and you were passionate on your position with Kaepernick and the knee, and I really cannot explain why I still have a problem with it. It still bothers me, trying to be discerning and learn from everything that we're doing and trying to open my mind and try to see it. I still have a problem with it. It's not him personally, although I don't like his behaviors. I don't know him. I've never had a conversation with him, but the things that he did even after the knee, you mentioned last week, were kind of stupid, took away from the message that he was trying to get out there. There's something about that. And where Tebow, he took a knee in the end zone. I don't know how many guys I see, point at, pray, whatever. I never, and they question his, character. Nothing's ever been reflected of that. I have a good feeling about Tebow. Tebow's a feel-good story. Maybe that shouldn't matter in the NFL. It should be, your athletic ability, but some of it is. So I still, Kaepernick, I can't get there, and Tebow I'm fine with. And if somebody wants to give him a shot, give him a shot. I mean, I'm sure they're not paying him $10 million. It's probably $500,000, whatever the league minimum is, but at least he's in there, and he can be a help. He might get some marketing and advertisement out of it too. It might help the team.
Exposure.
Yeah, well, yeah. And it might help the team because he is a feel-good story. Tebow being back, like when Tebow had the chance to go up to the majors a couple of times, they sold out all the tickets. I think he was up for a couple games or whatever. I mean, he does have power, drawing power. There's a star component to it. And if in the NFL you're trying to fill seats and sell beer and hot dogs, then run Tebow out there for a play or two.
Yeah, well, that was the biggest issue that people really had with Tebow was the media circus. They felt like this is somebody who has this huge following, creates this huge circus, but he doesn't have any of the talent necessary to be a starter in the NFL. Now, I'm not gonna argue that because, to be honest with you, I was a Tebow fan.
Right.
I'm of the mindset that if you're winning,
or a Tebow fan.
well, he's not playing a sport that I like. He wasn't playing a sport, so I can't be a fan of somebody who's not playing a sport. And I wasn't a fan of him from the perspective of, hey, I just like this guy, the cut of his jib or whatever. I was like, nah, he's winning games. I like that. That's all I care about. That's all I ever cared about. It was just, either you're winning or you're losing, and if you're winning, I like you. It's that simple for me. And so,
and he was winning games.
Well, no, because there's people that fight you about that,
Right.
And to me, it's like, nah, like, yeah, he threw like 44% for his career, you hear me, which is god awful.
Right.
But he was able to win some games. He won a playoff game, and Tony Romo had at that time. So it was like Tony Romo was putting up magnificent Hall of Fame type numbers. Couldn't win a playoff game.
Right.
And so, yeah, from that perspective, I was with Tim Tebow.
You got to be winning to be good?
No, not for them to be good, but if you're winning, I like you.
Oh, well, you said his talent level. There are a lot of people who are still on teams and still play that may not be as good as potentially other players in that position for the other dynamics that they bring to the team. Like Pujols, who retired this year, they didn't pick him up or whatever. He went out to the Angels or something. He was a Cardinal. His bat wasn't where it used to be, but he's Albert Pujols. When he gets in the dugout, he brings leadership and camaraderie. He was a DH, so he wasn't really fielding, but he brings star power and other things.
Yeah, but Pujols brought that because he earned that through his talent.
I agree. All right, so
Tebow
didn't earn it by winning a national title and the way he played in college.
Yeah, in college. That's a different game. And he played that, I told you, I would argue he's one of the best ever. Because, I respect 2 national championships. The man said he wouldn't never lose a game again, and he didn't. Like, I was impressed by those things.
Right.
But the NFL and college are just two different games.
No, I know.
And so, yeah, in the NFL, he didn't earn that. Now, when I compare him to Colin Kaepernick, like the major difference I see there is that Colin Kaepernick, he did display his talent to show I'm good enough to be a starter in this league. Now, if you want to argue that he fell off or he wasn't as good as he used to be, that's fine. You can make that argument, even though, like I just mentioned, Pete Carroll would disagree with you. But Tim Tebow never showed that, as far as all the professionals in charge would say. And he had multiple opportunities. He had 2 more opportunities after he was out of the league.
Right.
So when he's brought back now, we know this isn't a talent thing. So when people argue that Colin Kaepernick is out of the league because of the lack of talent,
right,
and Tebow is in the league because he just has leadership quality.
I don't think that Kaepernick is out of the league because of talent. I think Kaepernick is out of the league because he became a distraction, a very negative distraction. In other words, fans, people wouldn't attend the games. They wouldn't be. The PR was bad.
But he still sold out every game. But the thing, and I know what you're like. These are the things that are always tricky because media puts it out there like it's happening a certain way when it's not. But yes, there were problems, of course, because there were fans who didn't like it. And there were people that tailgated and they say what they say and acted the way it did.
Suffered
and
ratings drops and everything else.
We go over the number, that's not what's happened.
Well,
but
whether we painted
because the numbers are still down to this day.
Right, they are. But whether the media painted that image or not, it was attached to Kaepernick.
Yes.
Okay. And I still have a
which
problem with
I consider unfair because if we're looking at his purpose,
right,
just like you said, you can't come to being okay with it, and you don't understand why. And that is something that, number one, I respect you on that because there are times when certain things are just ingrained in us.
Right.
And when you hear something a certain way for so long, that's what you believe to be fact and truth. And it don't matter what else you hear. It's just like, I got to be missing something that makes what I believe true. even when you feel like you shouldn't believe it anymore. And the fact of the matter was that the things that happened with Kaepernick, the way the media took that and made it its own story, that's what was wrong. And he was wronged in that. He did things to make it look even worse going forward, to make himself look even worse, but those still weren't directly tied to the things that they did. And when I compare Tebow and Kaepernick, like I said, we're looking at, even if you say Kaepernick doesn't have talent, you're looking at talentless quarterback, and you're looking at media circus. How in the world is Tim Tebow back in the league then?
Because he's got a positive media circus.
But if the NFL has it's positive if you agree with it. Because I agree with Colin Kaepernick.
Right.
So therefore, the media circus, I think, is positive. I think the media is wrong, but I think the reason he has the media circus is a positive thing. So yeah, you're looking at two people in the exact same position, and that's where it leads to.
You know where I'm going to go with this, right? Do you know where I'm going to go?
No, I don't. But that's just why I say, we talk about leadership and maybe the character of the person. But the cause that Kaepernick fought for also leads to his character as well. So it's all, and it's not like there's anything quote unquote really bad. There's things that were distasteful, but not bad that he did.
No, he didn't punch anybody in the face, but he took a knee during the national anthem. Now, all right, I like your argument. I like what you're saying here. So, Kaepernick, media circus, negative, cost him a job. Tebow, media circus, which is positive.
If you're going to say Colin is negative, you got to say Tebow's negative.
No, wait a minute.
Because there's people that felt negative
about it. Kaepernick doesn't
it.
have a job and Tebow does.
Now.
Right, and it's a divide. So, where's the line, right? What are we talking about? Racial issues. Now, if the media influenced that, in other words, made what Kaepernick did bad, right? Mm-hmm. And Tebow is being portrayed well, okay? Or it's enough to get him the job. Whatever reason, Urban Meyer's connection, I don't care. But if you're making that argument, now I'm going to throw that back and say, well, if the media can influence that much racial, black man, white man, can they not do the same thing with a shooting? Because we've talked about this, where a black man gets shot, we hear all about that. We see it 10,000 times by an officer. We see it 10,000 times on TV and so forth. They're painting a narrative of racist cops, white cops, defund the police, get rid of them, etc., etc., etc. When you even brought up yourself, there's white people that are victims of police shootings as well. But the message is not, let's come up with a less than lethal policing component like what we have talked about. The message is racism because that sells it. Now what you do is you hype everybody up. The black population is obviously hurting. Nobody wants to see anyone get killed, so I'm not trying to, but becomes defensive and speaks of their own experiences. Well, it's got to be racism because an officer did this to me or I've experienced that. Then you create a divide for people who might be white and not racist and go, well, I'm not that way. I don't really understand this argument, or support law enforcement and realize that, okay, mistakes happen, bad things happen, there are bad people. Not all of them are white, but the media draws this clear line of racism, black versus white, or cops are inherently racist by nature, and that is more the problem. I think that you and I end up arguing or discussing in here is that the media has portrayed that. That may or may not be true. There's specific facts, and every case is unique, and we don't need to go through and break them all down, but you touched on this way back in some of our beginning conversations, the power of the algorithm and how the media is manipulating the audience because they want ratings or clicks or views or whatever. So if I can put in there a racially charged statement, I know I'm going to stir something up. And I think in the end, they don't think about what the long-term consequences of that are to people out in the world here who have to interact with each other, who have to, like last week you talked about, your wife being concerned about her going to a car, she has to hold her keys a certain way to protect her, or your daughter, who's a darker skinned individual, has to, a black girl, has to worry about her safety. She carries protection. Are we ramping everyone up to do that when there may not be as far a divide as we think? Because I think you and I find that greater are the bonds that hold us together than would ever tear us apart. I just feel like the media is manipulating that. And I don't know why. I don't know to what end. I've had this discussion with other people. I don't know the end game of doing that. If you're going to pit half the population against half the population, what do you want the outcome to be? Where is that, mentality of us as America coming together, like post 9/11 period, where we were all Americans, right? After the attack on the World Trade Center, we were the patriotism in America.
No, we weren't. That's something that it's a misgiving. The ideal, and that's what was pushed very heavily, and that was pushed by the media, yes. But what was happening in the streets is that Muslims was being terrorized by white and black people and Hispanic people,
All right, so there was a measure.
And there were situations where black people, of course, were being mistaken as Muslims because they have the Nation of Islam. So therefore, people assume that black people are also Muslims too, as if we don't go to church. And,
they were other.
Yeah, we suffered it. It just on the forefront in the news, it's America is united, and that's the message that they push. But this, like you say, the news is
what you're talking about. There were a lot of instances
or media, essentially in itself is evil entertainment. It is, the purpose of it is for ratings. There's not a true end game, I believe, beyond that.
Just
I believe
the moment.
I believe it's this moment and racism will always be a hot button topic, especially in America. But it is throughout the world, but especially in America. So yes, if Colin Kaepernick says that Black Lives Matter, or I'm tired of black people being shot, well, let me go over here and whisper to some white people, hey, he wants black people to live. And there's a segment of that population that'll be racist and say, yeah, I'm outraged. And they're going to act a butt about it. And then when something with Tim Tebow happens or whatever, they was like, oh, he's praising God. And there's a segment of the population that's going to be like, well, I'm atheist and I don't want to see that in my football. And they're going to always go for that simple, easy divide to boost ratings day to day. They have to do it every day. And the fact of the matter is, if they didn't, they probably wouldn't be nothing to talk about. So it's not that I'm knocking
right,
the
so
hustle to
creating.
They have to create it.
Right, so they're creating.
These are things that happen every day anyway.
The hype, right? All right, so great, because if we take all of that out and we start to get down to the things that happen every day, what I was just thinking while you were saying that is that means inherently that we all have bias. And there's a difference between bias and racism. It goes back to the concept of nepotism that you tied to Tebow. If I am biased towards my family, friends, church members, people of faith, a community, if I like the Atlanta Falcons and I like people who like the Atlanta Falcons, that's a bias. Now, race, now we can't have a bias towards race because...
No, people do.
But, right, well, we do.
Everyone does.
Well,
still
we
have
have
a bias
biases
towards races
against things too.
But that's where it becomes a problem. You can have a bias for it. If you like something more than the other, that's fine. That's how you feel.
But doesn't that inherently, by definition, mean I'm going to like something else less?
It means you'll like it less. But if you have a bias against it, that's something more. I.e., I can tell you, I love blondes. I just love blondes. Don't know what it is. I love blondes.
Did your wife?
Now, I'll date a redhead. She's redhead.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll date a redhead, right?
Don't try and catch him on that.
But don't ever bring a brunette around me. Oh, that's See the difference? Reds are okay. Love blondes. Brunettes, I'm like, that's a problem. Now it's a problem because now I'm not even open. I've segmented off a whole section of women for potential marriage because of the color of their hair.
Gotcha.
You see what I'm saying? And that's some is bias, some is preference, some is racism. Racism would be, yeah, I'll sleep with a brunette, but I'll never marry one. That's racist. Now,
I'm not going to get into that
because it's not the lack of attraction.
Right.
I'm attracted to him enough to spend time with her, sleep with her, whatever.
But I'm not value.
But I'm not going to be seen walking the streets with her.
I'll drive.
I'm not going to tell you.
I really only own a Chevy.
But that's the idea behind that. So it's like, yeah, we all have our preferences. You know, everybody does, and I'm not mad at anybody for having that preference. But it's when your preference goes to a bias that is against other people. Now that's a problem.
I think I agree with you because all right, classism, racism, those kind of components. If I have a bias, and I don't want to say it because it's going to sound wrong, but it would be misinterpreted. If I have a bias towards white friends because I know them, I'm comfortable with the culture of white people. I don't know. Let's say. That might be a bad example, but if I'm biased, well, no. I mean,
it's bad because we're talking about friends. A friend can come from anywhere. The same way I said. Now you can be more comfortable around white people in general because you're white.
Right.
So people feel safe. That's natural. The natural instinct is safety in numbers.
Correct.
And so if there's safety in numbers, you feel safer amongst those numbers that look like you.
Right.
Because they're more likely to think like you. To be like you, so you feel
that
safe.
Doesn't make me naturally inherently racist.
No, it doesn't.
The part that makes it racism is that my bias if
you say I want my friends to be white, that's now we're talking about being racist. You can say you're more comfortable around white people because you're white. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But to say I want my friends to be that means you're not open to other friends.
Okay, fair enough.
Or that you think lesser of your black friends or your Hispanic friends.
That
and then it's like, because of their race, that don't make sense.
Because getting to maybe this is a good discussion that'll take a while, but getting to what is racism.
Mm-hmm.
So is it excluding a portion of the population? Is it limiting the opportunities of a portion of the population? At what point does bias become racism?
I think that's a good
question.
That's a fantastic question, right?
There's a fine line.
Yeah,
there.
I believe when it's to detest, when you detest something, when you don't want to be around.
Detest.
Yeah, if you don't want to be around them, if you don't, it's to me to look at someone and say, I don't want to deal with with this person because of how they look. I don't want to communicate with them. I don't want them around me. I don't want to give the opportunity to know them.
So it has to only be about the way they look. I mean, racism is based on race, so I guess. What if I don't want to deal with people who speak a foreign language?
You don't speak the language. You're talking about a communication barrier. So You're saying you prefer to speak to someone who speaks the language you do. That's the same way about being comfortable around people. That's not the same thing. Now, if you're unwilling to attempt to talk to the person to begin with, because you know English isn't their first language, now you're discriminating. Because just because it's their second language don't mean that they can't speak English well enough for you to understand.
Or if I don't like people who are arrogant, that's a quality within oneself.
Okay. That's outside of race.
And
you
also
not like arrogant people.
Which I think something like I think let's take it from let's walk it as close as we can. So basically, somebody who doesn't want to deal with someone with a mental illness, would be ableist. It does change its form, right? Because based on
ableist,
being ableist means that you don't want to deal with somebody who might have a disability or a mental illness.
They call them ableist, of course, because able-bodied people.
Well, because you had people get angry.
I'm a therapist, and I'm never
We'll educate you.
I'm brushing up on my cultural components right here, and different things I'm learning.
I do think ableist is a newer term. I think it came up within the last couple of years.
Yeah,
I didn't really hear it before that.
Okay. So that is ableism, because I'm just not going to deal with. I can visibly see that this individual has Down syndrome. therefore I'm not going to speak to them.
Yeah, you avoid them, or you directly, you disregard their presence or something like that.
All right, so again though, but if I have a bias towards, let's say that, I know that I don't have the patience to try to work with that individual who might struggle. I know that I have a bias towards Susie over here who's not visibly mentally ill, and I go to her for assistance instead of that one. That makes me ableist? An ableism? Is that a practice?
Well, people may say that, but it's not. You're not discriminating based on the fact that they have a disability. You're discriminating based on the fact that I can't work with this.
I know me.
I can't.
I'm not saying that's true. I'm just using.
Well, I'm saying no. If that was the case, and that's what I said. That's not anywhere near the same.
Right, so if I have a bias, the bias then, if bias becomes an ism, when it what? I mean, I'm curious because I think that if I was going to speak to a young white person or a black person and try to help them understand, it's okay to like a group of people or a certain group of people who do a certain thing.
I think it's almost when it discriminates without knowledge. Like you discriminate without
context
there.
Context.
Yeah, because
like you can think, like you said. Well, I don't want to keep going back to that one, but you can think about that. Somebody being able-bodied or whatever. But
right.
You can think, well, this person has Down syndrome. I don't want to deal with them because I don't have the patience for that. But if you're not willing to try, that's where it's kind of problematic.
I think also it goes back to what you said about detest, because I think that does tie into it.
And when we talk about racism on an individual level, like you said, detest, like pure hatred of, like just off
your
sight.
skin
That's
color
different.
makes me right. No. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out how we would educate, because can we all agree that the term racism is overused right now by the media to promote and make situations hyperbolic and exaggerate circumstances? Can we say that the word racism is used too frequently currently?
I want to agree with you, but I look at like we talked about with the movies and overcorrection, and I can't be mad at overcorrection because I still know that the experience for so long wasn't even discussed. And yes, it may be an overcorrection because everything that somebody says is racist that I see isn't racism. There's plenty of times I see things that somebody, they would be, and I'm like, it's not
racist.
It's not really racism. They might not have liked the way you were talking to them because I don't like the way you were talking to me. But
I do think that people tend to drop the racism accusation without fully knowing the context of what they're talking about.
Well, it's just used too frequently now to try to put racism is using the word "you're a racist" is like a reverse form of racism because you're trying to cancel them. You're trying to put them in a box too. I'm not trying to argue that. I feel like my observation is that word is used an awful lot now. Everything is racist, and if you're not in this area agreeing with this group, you're a racist. And there are groups on both sides. If I don't agree with you, I'm racist. If you don't agree with me, you're racist.
Well, I personally have to have a certain amount of evidence for myself before I will call someone racist.
But I'm not worried about that. I'm the identity part is out there. If you watch the news today, the media, the word racism is used all the time, inappropriately in a lot of cases. What I'm trying to get at is if I was going to educate a young individual about what is the difference between having preferences and biases and favorites and whatever and actual racism. Okay? I'm curious at what point you can say it's vitriol or detestment towards someone based on their skin color, which tends to reveal heritage. So black, a darker brown, so maybe Hispanic or South American, skin tone and facial features of an Asian, someone of Middle Eastern descent or Eastern descent, right? You know what you call Asian descent. Asian. And then, a different skin color and body type for Middle Eastern and, Europeans were just white, I guess, most of us, I don't know. But if you're so a bias is, I like to be around people that I'm comfortable with, the comfort component, but because I play tennis at a place where there's no black people, that doesn't make me a racist. That's just, there's white people there that I play tennis with. I have a tendency or a preference to play at that facility a basketball, a group of black guys come together and they're playing and a white guy walks up and they don't want to include him. I mean, where does that become preference and bias and it becomes racism? Because I would want to educate somebody on that.
Well, and that wouldn't, it's not called racism. I'm trying to think of the word it would be, but when if a white person were to come up to play basketball with a group of black guys and none of us want to play with him one-on-one on our team, it's normally because we would perceive that he's not good at basketball. So therefore we're stereotyping him.
White men can't jump.
So it's not that that we're being racist. It's not that we have a problem with white people, white men, white women.
You're racially profiling the white guy.
Essentially, yes, that we don't believe you can play basketball.
Right.
So but the thing is that if you go to any black community right now, you step out there with a basketball, we're going to laugh, and then we're going to give you the opportunity to show us better. And if you can hoop, we'll play with you.
Right.
As in when we're dealing with racism, you're not touching this court.
Where a black kid rolls up.
That's what the idea would be.
And he gets out with the ball, and they say, court's taken or something.
I.e., I show up to your tennis club to play tennis.
Right.
And you're not allowed in here.
You can't come in.
Like, you can't even come in. Now we're dealing with racism. Right. We're not giving you the opportunity to even show that you are a quality person and that you can play tennis or anything
most
like
of them can't play tennis anyway. It's just hanging out.
Yeah. Well, but that's why I say quality person first, because I understand that when we're talking about these clubs, it's not really even about the sport all the time.
And this is where you get into that story, like the woman who stopped a black family from going into the country club pool that they were a member of. They were demanding their neighbor show proof of residence.
They were demanding them to show a key fob.
Yeah.
And it was just like, why? Who are you to ask for my key fob?
You're talking about a situation okay, maybe there was a small problem with people sneaking into the pool, because at every country club there's probably people sneaking in. But why is it a big deal now?
Because they were a black family, or were they checking everyone?
They were only checking the black family.
And that's something that I remember it was a few years ago when I watched a 14-year-old girl get completely slammed on her head by a police officer. The police officers came out there to basically shut down this pool party in the neighborhood. Well, it was the 14-year-old girl's birthday. She had got permission from the apartment complex to have this pool party there, the people that were there and everything, but some of the other people didn't like it and called the police and said, there's no way that all these people live here. I've never seen all these black people here before. Get them out of here.
Right.
And the police came out without any further knowledge than that, without communicating with any adults, and just started arresting and abusing teenage kids. So, that's
because the question of the cop is, the cop's going to say, hey, do you live here? And they're going to go, no, I don't. And then they just try and remove them from the...
we don't have to escalate the discussion to a time where an officer may have used unnecessary force. That's not what I'm trying to...
Well, I wasn't trying to get all the way to that.
I'm trying to articulate
a
sound discussion of where do we move from bias to racism? Because I think I said this.
Well, that's why I said there's a middle ground there of just... Then that's why I brought up this whole situation where I said the whole point of brunette and blonde was that there's the redhead in the middle, and it's just like, this is okay.
Yeah, it's
when you get to a point of where you're not willing to deal with, or I'm not going to
because of the color of this
thing they do not control.
Yeah, because the examples they're giving is the assumption of wrongdoing because it would take too much effort.
But I'm not talking about police.
Well, he wasn't talking about police, but that's what I'm saying. I.e., I'm a big man.
You are big.
All right. So I do not have an issue with someone saying they wouldn't date me or people saying I'm unattractive because I'm overweight. Why? Because I can control this. This is something I didn't control, and I can make the decision to lose weight or go get surgery or whatever. So I do control it. So I don't consider anyone who has a distaste for my weight to be discriminating against me. I don't, because like I said, I can control it. When we're talking about things that people can't control, and you're holding that against them,
right?
So that's where we're talking about. That's where racism actually settles in.
Argue with you about overweightness on whether.
Well, everybody has their opinion on that, but that's my personal opinion. I.e., there, and this comes back to the dating scene thing again, of course. But there are women who say they only date men 6 feet and above.
Right.
Well, a man doesn't control his height.
Right.
But if you tell a woman, well, I only date women in a size 6 dress and below,
you might be in trouble.
Now I'm wrong for that.
Are you discriminating?
They will say that a man is wrong and that he's discriminating. But
you're just saying your preference.
Oh, that's my preference.
Right.
But then a woman will say, well, no.
But you don't look at the women that are above a size 6 and go and limit opportunities or detest them or anything.
Well, you can say that in a great way the world has, in a sense, still, hear me?
Well,
it's not as well as bad. You can do that. But no, it's me just saying, no, I don't, that's not that. We are speaking on preference in that. But if I'm telling you, like, hey, I will not deal with a woman over a size 6. Now that's discriminating. Or at least to them. The reason I don't consider it that is because you chose your body size. You choose that. If you choose not to control it, it's on you.
Man, you might be.
I
want all women who are listening to this to send
this is my opinion
to Tillman because I'm not.
And the reason I take on that challenge is because, like, look at me. So you can't say that I'm discriminating against fat people. Like, stop.
Well, what about so baldness? I don't have control over that.
I mean, I guess if you don't have control over you.
So women that say that they don't like bald men, they're discriminating? I don't have any control over that.
But if you don't have any control over it, but that's like right now, I say that, no.
Do you think I did have control over it?
Because you're balding. You could go clean bald, and a woman may think that's cute on you. But you do, so you do have control somewhat of your hair. You could put on a toupee.
I could be.
You could make adjustments.
Or I could shave it all off.
You could.
But I can't look like Elliot.
There's things you can do. And like I said, I could get surgery to lose weight. You can get implants.
Which then you're crossing a couple of lines there. You're having surgery to make yourself viable for the mythological candidate.
It's a choice, so you can, right?
Well, wouldn't you say the problem is also with the person who's being so that's like so what? It's materialistic.
It is. Yes.
You know, I would argue that
if we're talking about dating, we're talking about being materialistic. Period.
Yeah, but I would say the person who like limits themselves to a set checkbox of like traits that a woman or man has is probably just not a good person. Like if they're not even because you're dealing with an imaginary human being.
But you're speaking from the perspective of a man.
Stop.
That's not.
Stop right there. Though that is an awesome point. All right, if you're developing a criteria for a partner or a date or whatever, and they've got to check some boxes, and that is, you said that's not a good person.
No, I think that's a bad person.
Isn't that an interesting correlation to where society is right now, where people have to identify in certain areas? Like the CIA has a recruitment video. Elliot watched it the other day. I should have sent it to you. I didn't. It was something I just caught. But where the young lady identifies as intersectional, homosexual,
it was a lot
multicultural, a lot of different. A lot of boxes she was checking, and that was to be accepted. Like, the CIA is cool, come be with us, and I check these boxes: intersectionality, homosexuality, mixed Latino, something, but it was a whole bunch of like common catchwords right now.
All in a row.
All in a row. Right. So this is a great point that
She was saying she was liberal.
Right, basically.
Said she was
Basically, yeah.
Well, but that's okay. And those are boxes that are checked, and our society says, oh, okay, you're good because you check those boxes. Well, here's the boxes that I check. I'm white, I'm heterosexual, I'm a Christian, I'm male, and I'm a conservative.
Mm-hmm.
Now, by checking those boxes, how many people do not like me now?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
A lot.
Pretty judgmental.
But is that bias, judgmentalness? Is that racism? Is that what the media has hyped up that if you're I put Southern in there too. Now I'm a Southern white heterosexual Christian conservative male.
When you put those things together, the reason why there's a lot of people that don't like you is because there's a lot of racist people that mark all those exact same boxes, and the only one that's missing is racist.
Right, but
so when you like it's you gave me okay, white you don't control, male you don't control,
right,
Christian you control, conservative you control.
Yeah.
So when you giving me those things, these are or heterosexual you control, I guess.
Well, that's a whole other point.
And we're not gonna get into that. But people assume
if I was all those things and gay, I'd be okay though, right?
You would be.
See, I don't know about
that. No, I'm not. No, this is not. These are not my clarifications. This is to be clear.
Yeah.
These are not my specifications. This is not what I think. I am speaking for the larger group of liberals.
And I will say this. I will hold this true. Yeah, I would say that anyone who judges another person based on any criteria without actually meeting the person is a bad person.
That's a racist.
Well, and the reason
regardless of a scale, I think they're a bad person if you don't even know somebody and immediately judge them based on the fact that you heard that they're a conservative. Like, you don't know the person because everybody falls on a whole different spectrum. You have no idea.
Well, who truly takes the time to get to know people nowadays anyway?
Hardly anybody.
So that's why
media blows it up. We got TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, and it's all glimpses of moments, and people draw conclusions from that. A 30-second video clip, and what doesn't happen is this: a discussion. And the whole point of what I want to go ahead. I didn't.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. The reason that I said that if you were gay, it would change all that is because of media, in a sense. Pete Buttigieg, who was running for president, he marked all those boxes that you mark, except for gay.
Right.
And he could run for president.
Now he's the EPA czar or something.
Yeah, I don't know, but
he got appointed.
But people were like, "Hey, he's a good guy." But also, there were people that said he marked that other box too.
What box?
Racist.
Was he?
There are people who said that
because he's white
from his hometown,
he's white.
The way he was the mayor.
I don't want to get.
No, that wasn't because because he was white.
I don't want to talk about him.
But yeah, I'm sure. But
so how? So
white,
to answer the thought and the question, to try to round it out, how do we educate someone to not do what you're talking about, judgmentalness, or biased or racist? I mean, how do we help them understand when your preference or your bias moves from that to racism? How do we help them understand that?
It's just when you don't give people a chance.
So because you may not like dark people, you should talk to dark people. You should give them a chance. That's what you should say to a young white person. Or to a young black person, you may not like cops, but you should talk to cops and give them a chance.
Cops on a race.
Yeah, but
for real. But they say they are. So I get it.
So a young black man, young black kid, you should. I don't like white people.
Yes, you should still talk to cops.
You should talk to white people and find out. I mean, and I hate that we broke it down so simply into black and white, because there's so much more to the content of your character and my character than the fact that you're black.
This is what I would say.
Or,
you know what?
We don't know what Elliot is.
And let me because honestly, this question was answered years ago actually. And it just clicked in my mind. It was by a rapper from Atlanta named Killer Mike. He said, if you're black, go to a white church and get to know the people there.
Yeah.
If you're white, go to the closest black church and sit down and get to know the people there. Have a meal with them. He was like, we have to have that cross connection, because if you tell me as a young black man, hey, you don't like the cops, well, you should go and talk to a cop. And I go and I talk to that one cop, and he's a butthole. Like, all right, yeah, I'm going to continue hating cops. Thanks for the advice.
Right.
You know, if you're a white person or a black person, whatever, you go and speak to the opposite race, and it's not the best or the brightest of them.
Right.
You're gonna, and that's why it's difficult for me today to understand how racism persists now, because there was a time, and I mean, people probably want to kill me for saying this, but there was a time where I could understand that if you have buildings and guns and all that sort of stuff and technology, and you go to this other country and they only got spears and they don't speak a language you understand and they're not even dressed, then you may think, okay, these people are idiots. I can see someone thinking that initially. Mm-hmm. But when you have today where black people have shown you the inventions that they have come up with, the way they may be able to handle in business or achieve in athletics or academics or whatever it may be, I think enough black people have shown that our minds develop just as well, that how could you possibly think today that you are still superior? And so that's why it's difficult for me to understand racism at all today.
Right, but you're going racism only in one direction.
Yes.
So I don't understand racism either way. Because there's as much racism from the black community to the white community. Yeah. But, all right, to wrap it up.
Go ahead.
We can come back to that next
time.
time.
We'll definitely get back to that.
Well, I mean, I've had difficulties talking. I mean, I've experienced racism from both
individuals.
Right. Yeah.
And that's why I said always speak to the.
Okay. Good. Right. The individual, not the system. My experiences have been. I've experienced it from both, but the point, to wrap it up, was that I like what you said. The rapper's quote about go to the church. If you're black, go to a white church. If you're white, go to a black church. Somebody who's not of faith, go to a white what?
Well, no, he also said go to mosque. He's a person that's not of faith, to that extent, as far as Christianity. He's not of that, but he was saying go to a mosque, go to
experience other cultures.
Go and visit other people and experience their culture, yes.
I agree with that. I think that's a good answer. It still didn't quite fully define.
Because it gives you multiple people to communicate with.
It doesn't clearly define the difference between bias and racism or exactly what racism is. But what it can do to a young person, if we're trying to help them, is say, okay, why don't you go at school and sit down and talk to the white kids or the black kids and get to know them more than once. Yes. Because it's, people are difficult. You catch me on the wrong day, you might not want to talk to me. So it might be a 2 or 3 day thing. So I like that idea. If you're white, go to a black church. If you're black, go to a white church. Amen.
Amen.